Thank you, Omar and Bill. This is always a highlight of ISRS Sub-Day, and we're just excited to be able to participate. Thank you for your leadership and for inviting us. I'm going to be speaking about residual astigmatism after toric IOL implantation. And this is actually not uncommon. In fact, it's been reported that at least 12% of toric IOLs have over a diopter of residual astigmatism. And I like to think of this systematically and in buckets. We have to figure out why before we can figure out how we're going to manage this. So simply we need to think, is this a location issue? Is this a power issue? Or is this a pathologic issue otherwise? This could result from incorrect placement, which could be due to marking or cyclotorsion, measurement errors. Posterior corneal astigmatism is a hot topic these days. Rotation and tilt, we're going to discuss measurement error, calculation error, and of course, irregular astigmatism resulting from dry eye, epithelial basement membrane dystrophy, or other factors. So why is this important? Because it affects how we see, as evidenced by a loose lens here in a trial frame. With a high toricity, we can just twist it and we can see the resulting image quality degradation. And obviously, the more we twist, the more we degrade. And you'll hear these subtle complaints about a slanting of vision, a slanting of light that is going to clue you into thinking a little bit about residual astigmatism. But not only does it affect image quality, it actually reduces the amount of astigmatism that we're trying to fix. In fact, if we look at a 30-degree misalignment, that can actually result in a 100% loss in a toric IOL. It's kind of hard to believe. In fact, in some ways, you can even think about utilizing that to your advantage if you actually overcorrected, and that's just kind of an interesting thought. Doctors Berdahl and Harden looked at almost 2,000 eyes and found that the vast majority of these, at least 2/3, are a counterclockwise rotation, not a clockwise rotation. And so we have to then decide, okay, how do we address this systematically? Well, it all depends on why it happened. If this was a rotation issue and we can neutralize the astigmatism, then we need to think about re-rotating it back. If it re-rotates after that, we can consider a reverse optic capture and perhaps a CTR. If this is an absolute power miscalculation, then we may have to exchange the IOL if it does not neutralize, or actually rotate the lens to decrease the astigmatic effect if that happens to be the best situation. But typically, going to the source of the problem is the best thing to do. If this is a pathologic process, we need to treat the underlying pathology. So let's work through this systematically. First, we have to have a reliable refraction to know what we're working with. Then we need to measure the IOL axis and know its toricity under a dilated condition, perhaps using the slit lamp biomicroscope and estimating whether it's through some software, there are apps for this now, or against a phoropter to be as precise as possible to figure out where it's rotated. Then we utilize online guidance. Astigmatismfix.com is an indispensable tool and such a wonderful contribution to our field that I just highly encourage you all to use it if you have not. Then you have to decide, does rotating the IOL work? And if it does, then that's the way to go. So here's an example of astigmatismfix.com. Well, let's look at a case presentation. Here's a patient who had monovision LASIK a number of years ago with oblique astigmatism that had low-power torics implanted in both eyes to try to reproduce the monovision. Had excellent uncorrected distance anterior acuity on day 1, 20/20 J1, but at 1 week had come back with decreased reading, and here we can see residual astigmatism. That looks like this would be neutralizable. So ray tracing technology is actually extraordinarily useful now in the clinic for this exact issue. And in fact, if we look at the dominant eye, it says, hey, looks like we did okay here. But if we look at the non-dominant eye, you can see a mismatch from the toric lens axis internally and the target axis. It looks like it rotated about 90 degrees, which mathematically works out. So we go back in, we mark the intended axis, we loosen with viscoelastic above and below, and then simply just rotate the lens back into position. Careful to remove the visco from behind the IOL, seat the IOL in the posterior capsule, and we can see we had a great result. And let's just go check the ray tracing, and it actually confirms that's what we see in real life. And that's great. And it actually matched the real post-op astigmat refraction as well. So another nice pearl, we can completely forget about cyclorotation effects. If we are doing a rotation, we just mark the intended axis and the incurred axis because it's already seated in that position. We know exactly where we're starting, and then we can just add 30-degree rotation if that's what we had planned on by astigmatismfix.com, and that helps us. Intraoperative aberrometry can also be very useful, but in general, we want to rotate the IOL if the spherical equivalent is near target, if the astigmatism is neutralizable, and if it re-rotates, consider a CTR or reverse optic capture. And if this does not look like it's going to work, laser vision correction is an option, IOL exchange is an option if these cannot be rotated easily. Thanks very much.